talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk? Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk? A chat with the ladies about their day, the ups and downs along the way. She's a cook, she's a chauffeur, she's a worker bee. First in the door and last to leave. Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk? Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk?
Welcome to Girl Talk. I'm Carol Voisin, and my co-host Regina Ayars is on vacation today. Girl Talk is a lively discussion of the opportunities, challenges, and successes of women in their daily lives. We interview women living in the Rogue Valley and elsewhere who are making a difference in our communities. Today, our topic is women returning to college, obstacles and rewards. We are going to be talking with Pam Vavra, a former member of our Rogue Valley community, who is visiting here this week to work with women to support their legal needs. Pam is a practicing attorney both in California and Oregon. Pam, why don't you give us a brief introduction of some of your background and who you are?
Oh, sure. So I started out in my adult life anyway as a software engineer, and I worked for almost 20 years in aerospace and defense supporting applied research. And I learned to do, I developed algorithms for doing image processing that were later used in Photoshop, things like that.
Oh my gosh.
And I just had an amazing career. I loved every minute of it. But I was laid off in the 90s, as so
From
many
what
people
company?
were. I was with Hughes Aircraft at the time in El Segundo, California.
Really? Oh, interesting.
But at the same time, my father became ill. So I ended up taking care of him until he passed away. And as many people, when their parents pass away, they tend to rethink their life. And I realized I had been so left brain oriented all my life, I wanted to develop the right hemisphere some. So I decided to go back to school then and started taking art and photography and just trying to develop that right hemisphere. I took on a lot of volunteer projects, and one of the things I did was volunteer for the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. So that planted a seed. I also began helping people start nonprofits and moved here to Ashland in 2003 and became involved with a number of nonprofits here.
I remember, yeah, you were really involved in our community.
I also became very involved in politics.
Yes, you did.
And ran a number of political campaigns. But then after about 10 years, I felt like, gee, I really want to get back into industry. But of course, software had passed me by entirely.
How did you know that?
Well, there have been so many changes in software over the past 10 years. The type of programming that I was doing was just not at all relevant to the way people are coding today.
So you couldn't just step into it?
Not at all.
Okay.
So I knew I'd have to go back to school no matter what. So I began to review various options. And I decided that I wanted to go to law school.
Well, why did you want to go to law school? You have to take the LSAT. It's 3 years. It's really rough. I mean, it's not an easy road. So why in the world would you want to go to law school?
Well, there were a number of reasons.
And at your age.
Sure. Well, there were a number of reasons. One was, like I said, when I did the volunteer work for the Legal Aid Foundation, I found that enormously rewarding. And all of my life, I've been motivated by social justice issues. And I felt that I could perhaps combine my interest in social justice with my technology interest and help Silicon Valley type companies or high-tech companies pursue their legal lives or their legal issues in a way that could benefit more of society rather than be deleterious to society. I thought I might go into patent law, and I thought one of my goals was to help combat bad patents. such as those of Monsanto, for example.
Very good.
That are, I believe, are a little more deleterious to society than they are beneficial. So that was my original idea, but when I got into law school, my eyes became open to so many opportunities. I didn't realize how many opportunities there are for people with law degrees to be in, and you only get a small inkling of it in the 3 short years that you're actually in law school. But that may be a little more down the road. I think as we talked earlier, I found law school to be an amazing experience, and I think it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Is that right? And you were at, and like you were saying, you were older than most of the students.
In fact, I used to say that I had been out of school longer than most of my fellow students had been born. I had been out of school for 37 years, and in fact, most of my fellow students were under 37. I had the greatest experience. You tend to develop study partners.
Yes.
I had a study buddy who I was the oldest person in the class, and she was the youngest.
Oh my gosh.
And she was African American, and we just became thick as thieves.
Wow.
And we helped each other the whole way through law school.
Nice. Very
and it
nice.
And I think part of what I really enjoyed about law school was the fact that it made me feel young again.
Because of all those around you
exactly,
were so much younger. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, when you associate with people of a certain age or culture or any ilk, you tend to feel like you are one of them. So I didn't realize that I was as old as I was. I thought I was more like 37 for those 3 years.
Nice. So it couldn't have been easy all the way through. Could you just give us some examples of challenges that you had?
Sure. One of the things is people use technology a lot more now than I did, even though I was pretty tech savvy. But there were a lot of things that people had to show me how to use. I didn't have an iPhone initially at all, and people had to teach me how they use the new technology. Whereas, I could run rings around people in Excel or doing spreadsheets, but there's a lot of technology that I didn't that I had to relearn or become more acclimated to. I think there's also different communication methods, and that's something that I'm finding even more today.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, I was, from the day of personal ads when you wanted to meet people, and now there's, swipe left or swipe right with Tinder, okay? But I used to write letters, handwritten letters. Nobody writes
you don't
handwritten.
do that.
No, nobody writes handwritten letters anymore. So, but, you say, well, what are some of the advantages? It turns out that if you're taking notes in a class, science has now shown that you will retain the material a little bit better if you handwrite the notes than if you type.
Really?
So I actually just considered that to be more of an advantage by handwriting the notes.
And that's proven scientific
There have
proof
been a number of studies, a number of studies have borne that out, that people will retain the information a little bit better if you write it down rather than type it. I don't know why that is, but
that's very
makes
interesting.
sense.
Yeah. How did you deal with professors who must have said, "Why in the world is this woman in my class?"
Well, it wasn't so much that I got, but I was warned by lawyers before. I talked to as many lawyers as I could find before I decided to go to law school, and I asked them, what kinds of challenges would you see for me? And they, from several of them, I got, Pam, don't challenge your professor. Law professors do not want to be challenged. just do
That's
what they say,
interesting.
don't ask questions.
Whoa.
Right? So that
How did you handle that? You always challenge people.
no, I learned not to.
Really?
You know, when you're in law school, you're just learning a certain way to do things, and you just need to trust that the system is going to work, and it does. It really does.
Okay.
So
I'll take your word for that. What about your fellow male students? How did they treat you? How did they react to you?
I did have some interesting situations. One in particular was I was running for office in law school. I was running to
good for
be
you.
a representative of a particular group, and there were males who were also running for that position, and I was clearly more qualified than any of them. And the decision, it wasn't like by vote or anything like that. The decision was in the hands of one male.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, they chose their successors is the way it worked.
Oh.
And I had really worked hard. I wanted to be that representative. And I had worked hard and done a lot of work to get there. And there was no question but that I was the more qualified candidate. But of course, he chose someone else.
How did you feel
young
about
man.
that?
I was pissed, but that's also the way life is. And that's part of the reason I went into law was because I feel very strong. I have a strong sense of justice, and so and part of it is experiencing injustice in life, and I think learning how to combat that in a multitude of different ways is.
So, if justice is something that you really feel strongly about, a value you have, what is justice for you? Can you give it some definition, especially given the fact that you are now a lawyer in both California and Oregon?
Well, certainly the concept of justice, I think everybody has an intuitive sense of what justice is about. In fact, there are experiments with gorillas, or at least chimpanzees, I'm not sure about gorillas, but with chimpanzees who they will receive a token for performing some work, and they will see a coworker or a cohabitant receiving a prized grape for their work. And you can a kibble versus a grape, and after a while you can see that they experience they recognize the injustice in that, and they will retaliate in different ways. So I think that's it. I think justice is just treating everyone fairly.
And fairly according to the law. And what kind of, as you were going through school, can you identify what was your favorite class?
I think civil procedure was probably
Civil procedure?
Civil procedure.
Oh, you got to tell us what that is.
Well, it was the only class that I got an A in my first semester, so maybe that was part of the reason. But of course, it's another part of the reason was it was one of my very favorite professors, Marina Shea, who was actually a clerk to Justice Stevens.
Really?
In the Supreme Court, yeah. So she was just this really fabulous person.
Oh, how nice, yeah.
And she just had a way of explaining things. Civil procedures is all the aspects of how are the courts formed, which courts have jurisdiction, how do you know when a court has jurisdiction over an individual, and so where can you sue people? Where do you have to take your lawsuit? And what are all the procedures that are required to go through that in order to sue someone? And there's all the rules of civil procedure include things like discovery when you are suing someone or being sued. We have a very unique system in the United States.
Well, tell us what discovery is.
Well, discovery is all of the information that you are required to provide and are entitled to receive from your opponent.
And you ask for that
You
from
ask
your
for it, right,
opponent.
in various forms.
And depositions?
Depositions is just one form of discovery.
Oh, I
right?
see. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have to give that to?
You do. You
do.
do. And the court does not oversee it. The attorneys are just required to know what they have to provide, what they can ask for, and what they're required to provide.
And what if they don't?
Well, then you would seek the judge's order.
Tell me-
And you might object. I mean, there might be reasons to object, but that has to do more with trial, trial work, which I've decided, I tried to get experience. I did a little bit of trial work. I clerked for a judge. I did a little bit of work for
What does clerking for a judge mean?
That means,
I don't know what that means.
it means being their gopher,
Oh,
essentially, but also doing a lot of research. So the attorneys will submit motions, and the judge has to rule on various motions, and the clerks compile all the information that the judge needs in order to rule on that motion.
I see.
So they'll do the research and present it to the judge, and maybe even provide the clerk's opinion of how the judge should rule based on the law and applying the law to the facts in the particular case. And then
That sounds like more fun than being a judge.
Oh, I don't know about that, but it was definitely a lot of fun, and just eye-opening and enormously educational. And
So I want to go one step further.
Sure.
What is required to be a judge?
Well, to be a judge, you first have to practice law for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And so I told...
Is that just the norm, or is it a requirement?
That's a requirement.
Requirement, okay.
And and you also must be 71 years or younger.
Oh, really?
To be first appointed. So so in other words, I was not eligible. I will never be a judge.
You will never be a
because I could not acquire 10 years of
years.
experience by the time I turned
I
71.
see. Okay. Okay. Too bad.
But I can be things like hearings officers, or there are other positions that are similar.
So, what is your biggest takeaway from law school? What would you say to someone who's midlife and they realize, I don't want to be a teacher any longer. I really like what I see going on today in the courts, especially around in Washington, D.C., and it would really be exciting to be a lawyer in this day and age. So what advice would you give to someone who may be midlife ready to make a change?
I feel like I'm the poster child for it's never too late to go back to school.
You are.
And I say don't hesitate, run, don't walk, just do it. Because...
Run, don't walk.
Wow. Run and just
do it.
Just do it. Get in there and do it and experience it. The thing that I didn't fully appreciate about law, I didn't have any lawyers in my family, in my immediate family at all, and so I didn't appreciate the work that lawyers do, to be honest. And it is so far-reaching what you can do when you have a law degree.
Give us an example.
Well, the whole job of a lawyer is to help people communicate and empower them in their legal pursuits. And so you learn an awful lot about the law, but you also learn a lot about communication. One of the best experiences I had was on a team doing contract negotiation. And we talked earlier a little bit about the differences between going to school late in life. And one of the advantages that I had, I believe, in going late in life, having a whole battery of life experience that I could bring to bear on situations, I think benefited me a great deal. And so I viewed contract negotiation as a puzzle, but mainly it's about trying to satisfy as many needs of both parties as possible. So it's an optimization problem, if you will, to maximize the satisfaction and maximize the amount of needs that you can get met. And I viewed it as, I would take the time rather than just establishing a position and standing firmly on it and asserting it. Instead of doing that, I was always the one to ask questions. Tell me more about why is it that you you seem really stuck on this particular point, and I'd like to hear more about it. Help me understand that. And so my team, there were 2 of us together working on this competition, and we won the national championship. And I think it was the national championship.
Congratulations!
And I think a large part of it was because I could bring that aspect of negotiation. Now, and that's not the style that every lawyer uses, but it's a very West Coast style. And when we competed,
well, I think it's a feminist style too.
You may be right there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just that the desire to understand and to communicate, as opposed to the desire to win. And I think I also want to point out that the school that I went to, which was Santa Clara Law School, is a Jesuit school.
Oh yeah.
And so and they have a large alternative dispute resolution focus, and so the desire is to keep people out of the courts rather than necessarily.
And that's a good thing to do.
So that's where I apply most of the work that I do, in fact, now, is to try to help people communicate better and build better fences, if you will, build better contracts, think things out in advance, and try to make sure that you are protecting yourself from any legal issue in the future.
So it sounds like a lawyer is an advocate.
Yes, absolutely.
So if I would hire you, you would be my advocate in the court, or with a client that I might be dealing with, or defending me if I was accused of something.
Right. But more important oftentimes is just helping to empower you to be able to understand how the court system works, understand what your rights are, understand what, if it's a contract, for example, what types of remedies can you get. A lot of people want to sue somebody, but they have to be able to demonstrate that they have experienced some harm or some damage. And so just understanding what are the elements of each cause of action that you would need to prove to a court if you wanted to pursue something like that. So a lot of it's just about education, about empowering and explaining terms and concepts, things like that.
So if a person comes to you and says, I need a lawyer, how would you sort through that?
Well, I usually ask, well, why do you think you need a lawyer? Okay, what's going on? Just tell me the story. And then we work.
You work from there.
From there, exactly.
Okay.
One of the reasons that I'm here in Oregon is, as you mentioned earlier, I'm licensed both in California and in Oregon.
I think that's wonderful.
And the reason I did that was after I graduated law school, all of my friends here in Oregon kept asking me for help. Can you help me form this partnership or an LLC? Or I really want to create a trust. Or I need an advance directive, or I need a will, and I couldn't help them because you have to be licensed in the state that you're working in, and so
you need to set up an office here.
I may.
Okay.
So I'm developing a 2-state practice, and that's what I hope to do. So that's why I came back, because I just recently received my license in Oregon, and so I had some deferred projects to work on mostly for friends.
One question, real quick one, that I have, and I've never quite understood, is, and you see it on TV all the time, how can you be a lawyer and represent someone like in a murder trial, and you know they're guilty, and yet you have to argue their innocence? Can you do that?
Oh, you have to.
You know, that's...
But there are some mechanisms that the courts will allow for situations so that a lawyer is not being asked to behave unethically.
Okay. A lawyer friend of mine in San Francisco said, Carol, being a lawyer has nothing to do with the law. It's everything about persuasion.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but certainly persuasion is a large part of trial, you know.
In trial, yeah.
Trial
Yes.
attorneys. It's really a show. You know, you're putting on a production because that is what you have to do. You have to persuade a jury or whatever, whoever the trier of fact is, that your client's position is the correct one.
Thank you, Pam. This is part one. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to part two because we have even more questions and issues to deal with. That is about all the time we have today for Girl Talk. I want to thank Pam Vavra. Thank you, Pam, for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And taking your time. I'd like to thank all of our volunteer crew. John Letts, our director. Thank you, John. Wanda Borland, David Nenow, and Joseph Koth. Thank you so much. Also, thanks to the Digital Media Center and SOU for hosting us. And just want to tell you a bit about some things that we have going on. I think I have them here. That we have Girl Talk on, Girl Talk can be seen on RVTV, Channel 15 with Ashland HomeNet, or Channel 182 with Charter at 3 p.m. on Saturdays and 6:30 p.m. Thursdays. So watch for us on RVTV, or on demand online at rvtv.sou.edu. Click on the public access at the top of the page and then search for Girl Talk. I hope you learned something new today. I know I did. And we'll return now to the second part of Girl Talk. I hope you'll watch. And at this point in time, I want to say thank you for watching and hope you'll join Girl Talk again. So bye-bye.